This is the StraitJacket Podcast. I'm Rachel Honda, licensed clinical social worker.
I'm Jeff, representative of Mental Health Resource.
And I am Ryan, and I'm a case manager for Trust SoCal.
Awesome. So, Ryan, why don't you give us a little bit of background on how you can relate to mental health and substance use?
So, I come from a pretty wild family tree of mental health and substance abuse. And it really has played into like my whole life leading up to now. Today, I have 28 months sober, so 2 years and 4 months.
Congrats.
Thank you. And which is huge for me because forever I couldn't even get 8 months sober, 6 months sober. But it was because I wasn't willing to do what I needed to do to stay sober. So I come from a family. I have a brother and a sister and a mom and dad. My parents are married and still married. And so I grew up in a household, and we didn't have money when I was younger. But then my dad's company took off when I was about 7 years old, and his electrical company took off, and then I was able to see the other side of what like money looks like, and he got into all these investments and things like that. You know, my dad, he would do some things that to make money just to keep us afloat until everything took off, but it was some things that I ended up getting into, you know, the hustle of like selling narcotics and things, if I'm going to be honest, on the podcast. So basically he was doing some stuff and his company took off. He quit doing whatever he was doing. But basically throughout my family, it's like my mom had a grandma who had 5 brothers who were all alcoholics. Her dad, which would be my great grandpa, he was running moonshine during Prohibition. So he had like a moonshine lab or whatever wherever they make the moonshine on his property. He was a farmer. They had no money, and he got caught at a whorehouse, prostitution ring place, and he got caught selling this stuff, and he got put in prison, and then he was pardoned by the president. My mom actually still has like this certificate that has like the president's, can't remember which one it was, but it has the president's like signature on it. But they pardoned him after 2 years because he was supposed to do 20 years in prison, but they let him out. But so that guy, the grandpa he ended up getting out. He died in a DUI accident with one of the sons, and then the other 4 sons all died alcoholically. It was just all alcoholic deaths, drank themselves to death. One drank himself to where he was so like obese that he ended up dying, but it was just very severe alcoholism. But my grandma had no issues, and that was coming from my mom's side. So then we have my dad's side. And if we go back to like great grandpa, what it was that my great grandma was knocked up by a head KKK leader in Texas, and she was raped, and then she took off to Washington State and and sorry if this is too much, but then had my grandpa, and then and then my grandpa got married and had 3 kids, which one was my dad, and my dad was a big time partier, but he was able to pull it out. But then my 2 aunts from that side have like the worst mental health imaginable. So then there's that family. One is a meth addict. One is just really, really bipolar, and we just don't talk to her. She won't talk to us. She lives right down the street from my parents' house, but like if we see her at the grocery store, she'll like leave and run away, and like just really bad like mental health. Hates us for no reason, but that's, you know, stuff that happens. And then on my mom's side, she has 5 siblings, counting her. So she has a sister. Wait, no, there's 4 of them. So it's my mom, she has a sister, and then 2 brothers. And one of the brothers is a heroin addict. He was an Oxycontin addict, crack addict. And then one of the brothers is an alcoholic. But the mental health, I would say, is like from my dad's side, it's like this bipolar / maybe something that's undiagnosed, because my sister has that type of mental health. She ended up inheriting that mental health, and she's struggling today with her mental health, which we don't know what it is for sure, but it's definitely some sort of bipolar mixed with possibly something else. Anyways, so that's kind of a little bit of the family background. But so I was born in this family of 5, and you know, we didn't have a lot of money, but I was always just very I was like the good kid, kept the family together, made everybody laugh. Like my role was to keep the family together. My dad and sister were fighting constantly. It was a constant thing. My sister couldn't get attention from my dad because he was busy. He was running a company. He was doing these outside activities, with drugs and stuff. And so he didn't have time for her. So she decided, look, like I need attention. So if I do negative things, then I can get attention. She didn't get into drugs or anything, but she was just a crazy woman to grow up with, to say the least. It was just whatever she could do to cause a fight or a problem, she would do it. And it was constant, right? It was difficult. I was just there to make the family laugh. I was really good in sports growing up. That's all I did. Played basketball, hung out with my friends, so by the time 13 comes, my sister goes to college, 13, 14, my sister goes to college. But then that's kind of when I started getting in a lot of trouble. So it was like they thought, oh, the problem's gone. She's going to college. And now Ryan, so at 12, right before I'll just say this. So I turned 12. I was playing basketball. I was in 6th grade. And I started hooking up with this neighbor girl at 12. And then at 12, by the time I turned 13, I'd gotten her pregnant. By the time I was 13, I started smoking weed every day, all day. I would drink 3 days a week at least. I just had to be fucked up. And it was the only way for me to shut my head off, where I didn't care about the problems at home. I didn't care about much, right? And I realize now, looking back, that I actually had depression, but I didn't know this until like later on in my life. But so I started partying. I got that girl pregnant. She had an abortion. And I just kept partying, and then basically started messing up in school. I started at 14 selling weed to all my friends. Like I would just buy not a lot, an ounce, break it down, sell it to my friends, and then just pick up another ounce and just do that and smoke for free and have like a little bit of money. In 9th grade, basically in also 8th grade, like I don't even know if I can say this, but someone robbed me for $40 of weed. So my thing was, if anybody fucked with me, I was going to fuck them so much harder, right? Mm-hmm. So they robbed me, so I went to his house and took his stuff from his house, right? And this was a long time ago. I was a young kid, but can I say stuff like that? Yeah. Okay, yeah. All right. I didn't know where we were going with this, but so I just was this kid that was very defiant. Once I got into the drugs, it was like I was the nicest kid, did everything right. And then as soon as I started smoking weed and drinking, it was like I didn't give a flying fuck. And I thought I was the coolest guy ever because I had all these friends and my family had money and I had all these girls and I played basketball and I was just like really good at basketball. But the more and more I got into the drugs, the more my basketball started like slipping away. So about 14 years old is when my parents started finding out everything. They found out about the neighbor girl, which they weren't happy about that. They found out about me smoking weed. They found out I was drinking. My grades were slipping, because I was in 9th grade. And then, because I was like a year older than everybody, basically, in my grade, because I went to pre-kindergarten when I was younger. Anyways, so by 15, it's like a big problem. My parents are freaking out. In between 9th and 10th grade was a really bad year for me and my family. Like, I was crazy. They'd be like, you're grounded. I'd be like, fuck you. And then like, they're like, you can't smoke weed. So I would just smoke weed at home in my house and be like, fuck you. So it turned out me and my dad got in fist fights. I would run and take off for like weeks at a time. And that became my next MO, was like running away and staying with these other rich girls that I knew that their parents were divorced. I had 2 of them in particular. Then I had a buddy also, and their parents loved me. So they let me stay there. And eventually when I got into my sophomore year, grades really started slipping, and I had ran away for like a month. And my parents were very anti-cops. It stems from like my mom's side, and I guess my dad. They were both very anti-cops. But my mom ended up calling the cop on me for being a runaway at 15, which is understandable. I was 15. I was living with some girl. They didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I went to this. Like. Basically, like it's like a jail where they take you juvenile detention center, and they held me for 2 weeks. My parents found this treatment center out in Oregon, and I was 15, and so I got driven because it was they couldn't send me to Washington because there was no lockdown, and they knew I would run, so they had to send me to Oregon where it was a lockdown facility because certain states have different rules. Sent me to Oregon. I was supposed to be there 28 days. I stayed 52. got in a fight, did drugs, smoked cigarettes, everything that you shouldn't be doing, I was doing, very defiant. The minute I get back, it's on and cracking again. I get caught using, like within the first couple of weeks, I got caught drinking and smoking weed again. So I wasn't into like hard narcotics or anything along those lines, but to my parents, even though my dad has this crazy past and I know my mom was right there, it's like they wanted something different for me. They came from nothing, worked their asses off, did some stuff that they're not proud of, but they were hoping for their kids that they would go to college and not do drugs and not party and things like that. So, because at the time it was like my dad's still drinking and partying all the time, and I'm like, and I didn't know he was doing what he was doing at that young age. I didn't find out anything really until I was about 19 years old, until I went to work for him, really is when I kind of figured out what was really going on when I was younger. Anyway, so I come back from treatment. I'm on the run again, staying with this girl, and finally my parents, it had been about 2 months I was back, and my parents called the neighbor girl who I'd gotten pregnant, who was like my friend, and was like, hey, tell Ryan to come home. So I came home, and they were like, look, like, we're not going to ground you anymore. Just as long as you're here, like, it's all good. Just do whatever you want to do. So I woke up about 8 hours later to two big mountain men, they call them.
Oh, gosh.
And one guy had zip ties, and then one guy was just, like, the skinny guy had zip ties, and the other guy was this huge dude, and they're standing over me, and they're like, you can go the easy way or the hard way. And I'm like, fuck. And, like, so, and my mom opened the door, and she's like, before they walked in, she's like, I love you. And then these guys walk in, and it's like I had no choice. So I get on a plane with them, and I go to Wilderness out in out in Idaho, Boise, Idaho. So I go out there to this place, and I do a 28-day wilderness for like kids, young kids that are like fucking up real bad. So I go to this wilderness, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the wilderness program. It's just that the wilderness program was getting kickbacks from the boarding school. So they were telling my parents, like, look, anything that they feared, they told them I did. I tried to run. I got in a fight. I did drugs. I did everything wrong, right? Even though I went there and I was like, fuck it, this is kind of cool. Like, sleeping out in the snow. Like, we'd make a fire, which we did from our own bow that we didn't have lighters, nothing. We would have to create a bow. They taught us everything, how to make animal traps, things like that. But so I thought it was very interesting. I'm from Washington. Like, I liked outdoors. I was like, this is pretty chill. And then like the coolest thing I think we did was we would hike. And then for like in the snow up to our knees, we'd hike like 7 miles a day. And then at night, sometimes we wouldn't have a tent. And so we would make a fire. We would dig a hole in the dirt, like get rid of the snow, get rid of some of the dirt, put the hot coals down, and then put the dirt over it. And then you would wrap your sleeping bag in a tarp because it'd get wet from the snow melting. And you would sleep on top of these like hot coals, even though like dirt's covering it. So it would actually keep you warm, which is pretty wild. But so yeah, I enjoyed it. And I think I'm going home, and the day I'm going home, they're like, yeah, by the way, you're going to boarding school. And I was like, oh fuck me. So here I am going now on a plane to Utah, Provo, Utah. And this is where shit gets kind of crazy. So I get over there to Provo, Utah. And at this point, like, I don't see a problem with my drug use. I just see a problem with my parents. Like, they're just trying to stop me from having fun. I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not doing anything that my dad hasn't done. Like, I just don't get them. Like, why are you up my ass so much when, like, everybody's smoking weed, everybody's drinking that I knew, right, that I was hanging out with. So, and their parents didn't give a fuck. So I thought it was like, well, what is the big deal here? So I really hated my parents at this point. So I get sent to this boarding school, and first night there, they're like, there's these 4 halls. They're like these long halls. And there's about in each, it's basically what they did for the school is they took an old church and turned it into this boarding school for men and females, but they were completely separated. So I was in there's these 4 male dorms. They're about, I don't even know, maybe 100 feet long, maybe a little longer. And then there's like these dividers, and there's like 4 bunk beds in each section of these like long hallways. And so they put me in the bottom section, the bottom hallway. And it was with all these, I was like, wait, well, like all the cooler kids were like up higher. And then it was like all these like computer nerds and like stuff that were in these like bottom row. And I was like, this is strange. So I'm in there, and all of a sudden the lights turn up, and I just hear screaming and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm in the very back of this like long hallway, right? And so I'm like, they're coming from this way, and I like come out, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? And I get like punched in the face, right? What? So I start, punching fools, and I get put up on this fucking desk, and I kick this dude in the face. They all take off running. Next morning at breakfast, they were like, hey, you got to come sit with us. You got to move upstairs with us, right? So they wanted the weak ones down there that they could beat up every night and like fuck with, right? So it ended up being this thing where it was like people that were sent there because their parents just didn't want to deal with them. They'd play video games all day. They were just assholes or whatever. But then there was the kids like me that were fighters, partiers, things like that were getting into a lot more trouble. And then it was like the kids could tell and people would get in trouble, but then they would get beat up even harder by other people. So there was like no way for these kids to really tell and be safe, right? Because you're still going to be here. Those guys might get punished, but then their friends are going to come for you. So it's like it created this thing. But I seen one guy get tied up with belts and whipped with belts. Seen a guy get held down and put hot sauce in his eyes. Seen a guy where they put salt on his hand and they were like, hey, let me put salt in this hand and I'll give you a cigarette. And they put an ice cube on his hand and then he closed his fist and he was supposed to open it when it started heating up. And they just grabbed onto his hand and it burnt a hole through his skin because of the ice and the salt will literally like burn a hole through your skin. People don't realize, I don't know if people realize that the combination. So yeah, bad kids. And I regret later. I didn't regret it then because I just like stepped back and I was like, fuck, these guys suck. But like at the same time, I wasn't going to go against them, right? Like it would have made shit way harder. I didn't know how. I was supposed to be there for 3.5 years, right? And I'm 15 and a half at this time. And they wanted to keep me till I was 19 because they can in Utah. It's the only state they can legally keep you until you're 19 years old. So my nickname from day 2 was Run Plans Ryan. So I was plotting the whole time. I'm getting out of here. No one had ever escaped, but I knew I was getting the fuck out of there. I don't care. I don't care that no one's escaped. There is a way out, and I found that way out. And but going back to that stuff, like I regretted that stuff that happened that I didn't say anything, but it was like if someone else would have been there, they most likely wouldn't have said anything either because it was like it's like being in prison. It's like you can't survive. You have to survive and just get through it, right? And so that's how I looked at it. And I was chilling. I was fine. No one was fucking with me because I was so good at basketball, and then I knew how to fight, and they just never fucked. And I was tall, and like I was 6 foot in the 8th grade. I thought I was going to be like 6'9", but I grew up 2 inches since 8th grade. I think that was the drugs that stunted it. But so anyway, so I'm in.
How'd you get out?
So I'm in boarding school, and my boys knew me as Run Plans Ryan, but I was plotting hard, and so basically. I ended up this is the only kind of thing I did to a kid that kind of was fucked up a little bit. But I got this kid, I was like, hey man, you can hang out with us if you pull that fire alarm. So when he pulled the fire alarm, I went to the back and found out that it unlocked the doors. So we're in this like locked place, right? And the only thing that could open the doors is staff or the fire alarm, right? So I find out, so I didn't run then, but now I know that the fire alarm unlocks all the doors because that's what I was checking for, right? So I was able to get a letter out. So this kid that was leaving, I gave him this letter. Basically what happened was I had a buddy, Doug, who had been there for 3 years. And he was a couple years older than me. He'd been there 3 years. And he had a best friend, and he was doing super well. And there was like, in that program, you can move up stages, like up to like a little bit more freedom. Well, the top spot, you could go to the library. And that was like the most freedom you would get, basically. But by yourself, basically. But so he ended up getting in trouble because he hooked up with one of the girls that also had that freedom to go to and they found out about it. So they sent him back with me. He was pissed. He wanted to leave. I was already plotting the whole time. He knew this guy that was leaving, and I gave him this letter to the kid that was leaving. And when that kid left, he mailed the letter to my ex-girlfriend, or the girl that I still was talking to at the time. And so Chelsea got the letter, gave it to my brother. My brother was in college. He gave it to my best friend. And my best friend, who I used to stay with sometimes, his mom was like, gave him the keys and was like, give him some money. He was like, go get this motherfucker. Like, go get him. So they drove up, 3 of my friends, just off a letter that said, I need to get out of here. I need you guys to drive to this address across the street and flash your lights at night so I know that you're there, right? So freaking that day, during the daytime, I was in my room and I'm like, oh God, I'm just praying that these fools show up. Like, I had no idea if they were going to come or not, but I had the whole thing planned out if they did, right? And so I had about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, some guy that I actually had punched in the face prior because like something happened. He kicked me in the knee and I punched him. And anyways, he comes up to me. He's like, hey man, there's these guys out there looking for you. Well, if these people from the school found out, because there was like this yard you could walk in, right? But it had, and this is one of the fences I had to jump, but it's like these fences, and then it had not barbed wire, but it had these like spikes on the top, and they were like super high fence. So there was like no way. And also the one reason why people like one person had escaped out of the yard, but they don't take people from Utah is the first thing. Second thing is that way there's nowhere to go. Second thing is like for that guy, when he escaped, like they shut down like the bus stations, the airport, like they went to all these places and made sure that this guy wasn't going to get, and they caught him right away. So I knew there was the only option is to like get picked up and get the fuck out of there. So anyway, so I come out and I see him and I'm like, and like I just walk away from him. Like I just see him and I'm just like this and I walk away from him. And then that night they were there flashing the lights. And I told the kid, I was like, oh, I'm getting some drugs tonight. I'll give it to you because I didn't want him to rat me out. Right. So I was like, I got drugs coming, bro. Tonight it's on. Like, come find me at 2 a.m. Right? I was leaving at 12. So I got another guy that had been there for 3 years that was always in trouble, but he was a big hockey fan. And so that night I saw him flashing the lights. And my buddy Doug, and I was like, all right. So I went to my friend Curran, who had been there a long time, and I gave him a watch. And I was like, hey, man, I'll give you this watch if you can get him out of the camera room to watch this hockey game with him. So he went down there, got the guy out of the camera room to watch this hockey game. It was about 11:30 at night when I sent him down there. And at 12 o'clock, fucking, we were gone, dude. We snuck into the school, pulled the fire alarm, went out the back, hopped the fence, and I ended up like cutting this huge chunk out of my knee on the fence, got into the car, and we were gone. So I get back to Washington, and then I have all these private investigators chasing me from the school, and then the people from the school were chasing me. They were offering like $1,000 rewards. So at this point, my parents owned 51% of me, and the people from the school owned 49% of me, right? But the main reason they wanted me back is because the whole thing was no one had ever escaped, no one will escape is what they tell everybody, and I screwed them, right? And that's why my parents sent me there, was because it was like their selling point was no one will ever escape from this place. Like it's impossible. They might get out for a second, but there's no way to go anywhere. So, so they're hunting me down. They almost catch me a couple times. They tackled two of my different buddies at different points where they thought they were me, and they literally like tackled them on the beach. They thought they were me. So one time I was staying at my buddy Eric's house, the guy that picked me up, and his mom was super cool, and she was dating this crackhead guy, and he came and woke us up at like 7 a.m. He's like, they're out there, man. And I was sitting there thinking like, yeah, I'm sure they're out there. Like, but what had happened was that the parking lot across the street from the school had a camera in it because it was like a Safeway, and they got the license plate, and it was his mom's license plate. So they were able to go to that address. So they were actually there. So I jumped in the car, high speed pursuit. My buddy blew through this fucking red light, and luckily they stopped because they didn't want to die. So escaped again, still on the run. Month passes. The people from the school go home, and then I just have these private investigators who ironically were this is hard to believe, but the private investigators that worked on the Princess Diana case. So these are like big time private fucking investigators. And at this point, my parents are paying them. So the school backed out, and now because my parents have money, so they're paying these guys, right? And so they almost catch me. They knew that they could follow this girl, the girl Chelsea, and that at some point I would probably see her. So they start following her. They almost catch up to me. Long story short, my parents wanted me to come home. I ended up coming home with a knife. Like, I'm not going back. If someone wants to stop me, like, not my parents, but like if these guys want to stop me, like, okay, right? And my parents were just like, nah, like we didn't know how bad it was. We didn't know what was going on. Because when I was in the school, like they would let you make a phone call to your parents every month for 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, but they were in the room and it was on speaker, and if you said anything, it was hang up. If you wrote a letter, they would pre-read it. If they didn't like it, they wouldn't send it out, right? Jeez. I had to say like, this place is amazing, or they're going to hang up the phone, or not, the letter is done. So really controlling. And a lot of these places actually got like shut down. The only cool thing I got to do when I was in boarding school was I got to play basketball at these other schools, but these like guards would take us over there. And I actually was playing against Paris Hilton's school when she was actually in that school. And she had some really bad shit happen to her. So Paris Hilton now is like going to the Capitol, like as we speak, like this current time. And she's like trying to bring awareness to these boarding schools because she had to shower naked for these male guards, and like all this stuff happened to her. Yeah.
Didn't she come out with like some sort of special on that?
Yeah, she did. Yeah. Yes. Okay. And now it's like in court right now. Like I don't know what it's in, but she's been going, I saw it on like C-SPAN the other day. So she's like bringing awareness to these boarding schools and like what they're doing. And then they just came out with a documentary on Netflix. Can't remember the name of it, but it's basically it's the horror stories of these boarding schools and these wilderness programs and stuff like that. So anyway, long story short, I end up staying, and then I go to a private school. and sent it back to Stadium High School, which I was at this huge high school called Stadium, and it was actually where they filmed the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, and it's like, it looks like a castle. And we had 4,500 people in our school, and like, so my parents were like, that's a bad idea. Let's send them to this small private school. I lasted about 6 months, and 6 months in, they handed me this piece of paper, and it was like everything bad that I've done for the reasons to kick me out. And like majority of it too was like, Ryan, they'd never seen people give DAP before. So this was like back in the beginning, right? And the private schools hadn't seen it, right? So like they thought I was passing drugs. I wasn't doing it in the school, but outside of the school I was. But they thought I was doing it like just in the hallways with people, and like, so they ended up kicking me out. And like the final straw was this deaf kid. It got burnt on accident. Like I was super high, and I was burning this piece of glass, and I put it on the table, and this deaf kid came and put his arm down, and it like we had hearing, he wasn't deaf, but and it like burnt the skin off his arm, and that was like the final draw where they're like, you're out. So now I'm out, and they give me this list, and it's like all this shit. And it's like, because my first day of school there too, so I'd been getting in trouble since day one. But my first day of school there, I was across the street, and I was smoking a blunt. And this guy rolled up on me, and he's like, hey, you can't be here smoking. And I thought he worked for like the casino, because I was in like this casino parking lot. And I was like, fuck you, get the fuck out of here. And then like I walk into school, and it was the principal. So, and that was day one. So they already had it like out for me. And I was in these like drug and alcohol classes in the school that they made me go to once a week. And anyways, so, you know, that's when, after that is when I really got into selling drugs. I was about 16, going on 17. It was weed. You know, I got heavy into selling weed. And then it went from weed, and it went a year later, by like 17 and a half, it was cocaine and weed. And that's how I supported myself for 10 years, you know. And I would like to talk about, so it's not just like a drunkalogue, but like when I look back, because eventually I go on this like antidepressant, which changes a lot for me. And this happened about 5 years ago. But when I look back, I didn't think I had depression, because I would laugh a lot and stuff like that. But I had this weird depression where I would wake up super depressed. I would like go through these depressive spells, and I didn't know what it was, but I used the drugs and stuff to cope with that depression, right? So that was like my antidote, was using the drugs and the women and gambling and fighting and whatever it was to manage the depression, so I didn't have to feel the depression, right? I knew if I got in a fight, I would be high mentally for like 7 days after, right? I'd get this adrenaline rush, and then I would be like on this like high. Whether I won or not, I was on this high. And so I got into a lot of fighting, and that got me in so much trouble. And so anyways, so I'm selling drugs. 18 comes around, and at 17 I moved out with this Native American guy, and like was selling drugs out of his house. Then 18 came along, and it was my senior year. I was gonna actually graduate, but I was like paying people in weed to do these alternative classes. But I was back at Stadium, so I was like taking classes, but you could like bring the tests home, and so I was paying people in weed to do that. Then I was just taking the easy classes, right, the electives and shit. And anyway, so I'm about to graduate, month from graduating, and we used to fight all the time after school. So my buddy comes to me, and I ate mushrooms in sixth period, the last period of the day, and I come out, my buddy's like, I'm going to fight this guy. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And like normally you're calm on mushrooms, but I go to this fight, and I see him fighting, and they're punching each other, but nothing's like happening. So I walk up, and I like deck the guy that he was like fighting. There was about 150 people there, and we were filming this fight, right?
Oh,
I turned around, I'm like all crazy, and he gets up and runs and jumps into the car and locks himself in his buddy's car. And I, crazy enough, jumped on the hood of the car, and I punched the windshield and like spider webbed it. I didn't break through it, but I spider webbed it. The owner of the car unlocked the door, and I ripped him out, and I punched him. And then my buddy kicked him in. This different buddy kicked him in the face. So we all three went to jail. One of the guys that went to jail with me, he actually just 5 years ago, his name was Tony Miles, and he got second place in World Series of Poker and got $5 million. This was like 5 years ago, but which is like a huge fucking tournament, big deal. But anyways, so I ended up going to jail for that, and I got sentenced to a year in jail with 11 months suspended. So I served a month on that. And so I get out, and then I'm selling drugs, and I had like 4 dudes that were working for me at the time, and one of them owed me money and decided he wasn't going to pay me, and I ran into him, and I was like, look, bro, I'm off probation in a few months. I'm going to come after you, right? And he was sitting on this guardrail, and I was with 6 of my friends, and I was sitting on this guardrail, and he came at me with a beer bottle and tried to hit me with the beer bottle. So I grabbed his arm, took the bottle, and I hit him in the face with it. It didn't break. It was just like tink, and it split his forehead wide open. And some other stuff happened. I beat him up, and I'm not going to even tell the rest. But there was just some crazy shit happened at that point. So I ended up going to jail for that. But what did I always have? Parents bailing me out, getting me the good lawyers every single time. So I wasn't really doing real time. I should have went to prison for sure, but I didn't because I had the family saving me. So once again, they get me another lawyer, and this lawyer is like the best lawyer in town because now I'm on probation. I catch another one, and so I got no time for the second one, but they were able to get me for that 11 months that I had remaining from the first one that I had suspended. So I kept like going into jail because I was eating up that 11 months. It's kind of hard to explain, but anyway, so I ended up doing a year and a 2.5 year period. I did a year in county. And I had a month till I was off probation, right? And I still had, I think it was 90 days left over my head, and they were going to throw me back in if I failed. And I got high again on Oxycontin. At this point, I'm on Oxycontin. And I'm like, fuck, can't go back to jail. I don't know what to do. So I took a razor blade out, and I cut my big toe open to the bone, filleted it. Went in there. I know it doesn't make sense, but I went in there and they gave me stitches, obviously. And they were like, we're going to give you Vicodin. And I was like, no. It has to be Percocet. I'm allergic to Vicodin. Percocet shows up as Oxycontin. Went into my PO's office and was like, boop. Was able to fail the last month. And she was pissed because she knew, and she fucking hated me. So I was able to get off probation, which was lucky. Because then I didn't get arrested for like 11 more years. But I continue living on my own. I'm living with this girl, selling cocaine, selling weed. I'm hooked on Oxycontin bad, right? But to me, I thought heroin was horrible, but Oxycontin was fine. So I didn't realize that it was the same thing. And I was paying so much money. So I had a $400 a day habit that I had to keep up with. Well, by the time I was 26, it was like everybody was going to either Oxy, meth, heroin, etc. So people weren't doing cocaine, and I had to make over $400 a day, pay rent plus my $400 a day habit between me and my chick, and like it was fucking outrageous. So got to a point where I basically my drug business was crumbling, right? So long story short, this is probably the craziest part, but I was running out of money. I had my own apartment. I got to a point where I wasn't going to even be able to pay my rent. And I go to this party and I get drunk, and I run into some guy that I basically owed money to, and we fought. And so I tackle him, and we roll off this hill. We're at this really nice house by a golf course. And I tackle him, we roll up this hill, and I'm like punching him in the face, and we roll right out in the middle of the street. And by the time we end up finishing rolling, I'm like on top of him, like straddling him, and I'm just like pounding his face in. And the cops were actually there down on the street, and I didn't know it. So they came running up, and they had tasers out, and they were like, get on the fucking ground. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I'm like getting on the ground. And my brother was shit-faced, and he's a nut when he's drunk. Quiet, shy when he's not, crazy when he's drunk. And he came running up, picked me up by my shoulders, and was like, run. So I'm running on one side of the street. He's running and has this fat cop chasing him on this side of the street. And I have this rookie chasing me. Literally, it's his first year. I'll tell you how I know that, but it's his first year as a cop. So he ends up telling me, I'm going to tase you in the back. And so I'm like, fuck, I stop, because I was born with AFib, so I thought it could actually like kill me if he tased me. I stopped. He put me in handcuffs. My brother kept going, and he throws me on the ground. And then this neighbor, who I'm guessing called the cops, grabbed somebody that ran through his yard, and the guy was like yelling like, hey, help me. And so I was like, I looked at the cop, I was like, aren't you going to help this guy? So he went after the guy to help him, and I popped up, and I was fucking gone. So there was this golf course, and I ran, and I just hit this fence waist deep, flipped into the golf course. And I sat in there for a couple hours until I was about to pee myself, because I couldn't get to my pants, and so I ended up going back, sneaking towards the house. Long story short, I run to my brother coming through the bushes. That cop didn't catch him either. So then we go to this other spot. He calls his buddy, picks us up. We go back to his house. So we're in his house, and I just couldn't wait to smoke a fucking cigarette. So he was able to get a hacksaw and saw the middle part in half, right? Just the middle part. He couldn't get the actual bracelet because it was a hacksaw, and he couldn't, but he could get this like middle part, even though it was behind my back. It was like this middle part he was able to saw in half with a hacksaw. So I'm free, and I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, dude. And so I go out, and I start smoking a cigarette. I should have went out back, but I went out front. All of a sudden, cops are driving at his house. he had left his car behind. It was the only car left behind. They ran the license plate and we're like, oh, maybe this is who it is. So they fucking come in. We're hiding in the fucking closets with shotguns loaded. They're banging on the doors for hours. We thought they were just going to come in. I don't know why we had loaded shotguns, but we were in there tripping. So they end up leaving. The next day, I break down to my parents, and I'm just like, I need fucking help. They cut the handcuffs off with bolt cutters, and and then I'm like, I need treatment. And that's when I went. That was the first time I came to them. I'd been to treatment prior for court reasons, but this was, or like sent by them, but this was the first time I ever came to them, and I was like, I need fucking help. And so they were able to get the cuffs off, and then a couple hours later I get a phone call, and it's my buddy who owned the house, and the cop showed up the next day and was like, I'm a rookie, I need those cuffs back. Well, they were already cut up into a million pieces, into like 8 pieces. We rubbed them down, rubbing alcohol, and like threw them into the woods already. I don't know if I should be saying any of this, but we could edit stuff too if we have to. And then, so I take off and I go to a treatment center up in Aspen, Colorado. And back then it was all cash pay for treatment. There was no luxury of insurance or anything like that. So, it's like 50,000 here, 50,000, you know what I mean? So go up there, I do a 90-day program. It was 50 grand, skied 5 days a week. And then I came to California, stayed sober from there, got sober down here. And then the depression kicked in when I was sober because I wasn't willing to work a program. So I would get discontent, irritable, and I'd get depressed. And at this point I hadn't found an antidepressant. So I start using again. Now I'm selling, and then I get into heroin and I realize heroin is Oxycontin, but Oxycontin just seemed better because everybody knows heroin's bad, but no one knew how bad Oxycontin was because the pharmaceutical companies pushed it like it was like this cure for any type of pain, non-habit forming. Well, we all know they lied and got millions and millions of people hooked on drugs. Anyway, so I sell drugs out here. It's like I'll end up homeless because now I'm in California where I don't know a lot of people. Like back home, I'm always good. But out here, it was like I would end up homeless. I would end up just crazy living off of girls. Like that was my big thing, was like I would find a chick that was cute, and then I would live off of her. They would work, and like they would just try to fix me. And it always lasts about 1.5 to 2 years before they're like, okay, I can't fix this guy. And then it was like time to move on, right? So I did that for a long time, and I would sell drugs and go in and out of treatment centers, but I wasn't willing to work a program. So basically it was about, I don't know, 3 years ago, I met this girl, Chloe. We got sober together. And we moved in together, and she's still sober today with like, I guess it's a little over 3 years, I think is what it is. Anyway, so I meet her, I move in with her. And at this point, it's like things have started changing in my life. I'm on this antidepressant, which now when I'm sober, I'm not depressed like I was. I wake up happy, everything's good. And I realized like I would have never had a chance to get sober until I went on this antidepressant. Because until I fixed the mental health aspect, I couldn't fix the addiction aspect, because the addiction was my cure to my mental health, right? So, and throughout these treatment stages, they tried to put me on antidepressants, and I was like, yeah, I'm not getting hooked on that shit, right? Like, I'll go do whatever, you know what I mean? Heroin that came out of some Mexican guy's butt, but don't you dare try to get me hooked on Prozac or something like that, right? So eventually I cave, I get really depressed. That was like 5 years ago, but I ended up going on it. And anyway, so in that 5 years, I noticed I was just getting better in a hole. I wasn't able to completely stay sober, but I was getting longer stints of sobriety. I was at least like going to AA. I was changing things. I was acting more mature. At the same time, I was like growing up, you know what I mean? And so I was definitely evolving. And then basically 2 years and 4 months ago, I was with that girl, and I started getting high, and I go to treatment, and then I finally was able to get sober. The thing that saved me was I had a month sober, and I came back from treatment. I moved in with this girl that was sober, and her rule for me to live there still was I had to go to a meeting every day, which probably saved my life, along with my mom was like, why don't you try working in treatment again? It's been about 10 years. Try working in treatment. And I think that's a combination of AA, three things: the antidepressant, AA, and working in treatment are the three things that got me sober, and is why I'm still sober today, and why I know I'm going to be sober tomorrow, is because of this, right? I used to always be before, it's like if I was sober, it's like I can't promise 2 hours from now, but now it's like I know I'm going to be sober, and now I'm planning for like the future, and I'm like I have a credit. So I was telling Rachel the other day that like they wouldn't even give me a credit score. You know, at 37 years old, they're like, yeah, we can't even give you've never had a credit card, you've never like, it's just like, so I had to like pay into put $100 down on a $500 credit card limit, build it up, and now I have like 6 credit cards and I have a 620 credit score, and like, I have 15 grand in the bank, like completely different than any other time before. I live on my own. I have a cat. Like I work in treatment.
Don't forget the cat.
I wish if I would have remembered, I would have brought Bonnie for this interview, because she would have had a lot to say about how good I'm doing too. So, but yeah, so it's just good, man. It's like my life has changed so much, but it's the best decision I think I made too was just working in treatment, because then it's like, for me, what I've realized is it's about helping other people. That's what's going to keep you sober. It's helping others. If you want to get sober, and that's like basically the whole foundation of AA too, is like work these steps so then you can give it back and help others. And I've realized that like when I was doing bad things, it was like I was getting hit with all this shit all the time. I'm doing good things, and it's like I'm getting hit with all this positive stuff all the time, and it is completely better life, and like I'm happy. I talked to my dad wouldn't even talk to me. Like I was talking to him on Christmas, and now yesterday he just called me just to talk, and we talked for like 45 minutes for no reason. It's just so strange, but I love it, right? I'm going to Hawaii with him in a couple months. I've been going home to visit. And it's not because I'm telling them I'm sober. It's because they see that I'm sober. I used to tell them all the time, oh, I'm doing this. And I would get some time together, but they still were like, yeah, he's fucked because of my behaviors, because I wasn't doing anything. But now it's like they trust me. They're calling me to deal with my sister, because since COVID hit, my brother and sister have been struggling with alcoholism. And my sister's been struggling big time with alcoholism and mental health on like a severe degree. So, we're actually trying to get them help now. I'm going to be flying home possibly for a weekend in a couple weeks to do like an intervention for her. And but yeah, so I mean, now I can help others, but I will say that I went to school for, to be a case manager, and the thing that they told me was that 80% of people have dual diagnosis that are drug addicts. 80% of people that get hooked on drugs have a mental health issue, and they cope with it by using drugs, because that's like the solution. It's a temporary solution, and it works in the beginning, but it will always turn on you in the end. And so a lot of these people, they just need mental health awareness, and they need to realize, like, when you're working with a doctor, you do need to try some things even though you don't want to, because they had a better idea of what was going on than I did. But I kept saying, like, they don't know what they're talking about, and I will just keep doing heroin or whatever, right? And that did not work, and it ruined my relationships with everybody. And like, I'm grateful, lucky to be alive. I've almost died a bunch of times, whether it was from drugs or from situations I put myself in, or, but anyways, I did a lot of rambling, but I'm just grateful to be sober. I'm grateful for AA, and I'm grateful for mental health awareness. I'm grateful I was able to do this podcast for everybody, and hopefully get some help to somebody else that's struggling with depression or bipolar, that knows that, there is help out there. You just need to reach out for it, and most likely get into treatment where you can see specialists, doctors, things like that nature, so you can move forward in your life and have a good life. Like, I never thought I could live on my own and just be chilling. Like, granted, I have my cat babysitting me, but like, it's amazing, right? So I just never thought I could get there.
How has therapy played a role?
Huge. So I've been doing, this is the other thing that I even tell everybody, because like, it's not that big of it. It's a great thing. It's a very positive thing. So I tell all my clients too, it's like, they think, oh, I'll do therapy for a month and that's all I need, right? I am still in therapy. For the first almost 2 years, I did every week, and now I'm every 2 weeks. So, and I love my therapist, and she's, gosh, and that's another thing, is like, I didn't add that into like one of the things that helps, but I know that is one of the things that helps. And she helped me work through this stuff, like about my family and like all this stuff. And like, if I could recommend anything, it's, if you get sober, don't think like, oh, now I got this. It's like, now let's start implementing other things so I can move forward and have a life. I had an old sponsor, and he used to say, when you think you can do less, you need to do more, And I believe that, because when you think like, I got this, I'll be 2 years sober now, I don't need to help people now, I can just hang out with my wife or meet girls or do whatever. It's like, you have no idea what's coming if you don't keep giving yourself your daily medicine by Alcoholics Anonymous, helping people, working on your mental health, things along those lines.
You have to maintain this.
You have to maintain it, and it's work. And that's the thing, is like, people, it's crazy. It's like, people used to always say too, they'd be like, I'm grateful to be an alcoholic addict. And I'd be like, oh, you guys are fucking retarded. Like, who would be grateful for that? But now how my life is today, it's like, if I wouldn't have went through that, then I wouldn't have the good things I have today, and I wouldn't be able to help the people I'm helping today. And now I know I can stay sober forever. That it's like, because before I always thought like, this is going to end soon. Like, anytime I got sober, I was like, oh, this is like milk. It has an expiration date. When's it going to fucking
Then you
end?
just sabotage it yourself.
And then it's like, fuck it. Yeah. Yep. So now it's like, I have the confidence but you know, I have 3 sponsees. It's like, I'm actually doing stuff. I'm not just, I don't know. I used to just talk to my parents and like, but now they see it. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's like, it came to a point where they were like, just stop talking and just show us. And then I finally was able to. But it's a lot. It's not a lot of work, but it has to be consistent work. It's easy, but it just has to be consistent. And that's where most people fall off, is they don't want to do the consistent work.
Yeah, that's true. So,
That was the easiest interview.
I know. You
Ever.
honestly answered all the questions I had. The only thing...
I like to talk. No.
Tied it together
I loved
well.
it.
Yeah, thank
Tied
you.
it together really well.
Yeah, like the struggles, and then mental health, and also the hope, I
Yep.
guess.
Yep.
So,
There is hope, but, you know, the thing is that like, people that are struggling with like suicidal ideations, things like that, it's like, there is hope and there is a way to get better. You just have to put in the work. Don't ever give up on yourself, because there was points in times where I almost gave up on myself and just said, fuck it, I'd be better off not living. But what I realized was, and I realize this for anybody, is if you stop getting in your own way and start doing what people are recommending to you, or go get help, seek it out, and actually do the stuff that they're telling you to do, then your life can get better and will get better. But we have to work for it. If we just sit back and we're going to be at home and just stay miserable and not work for it, then we're going to continue to be, you know, sick and unwell.
right.
So I just always think that everybody has a second chance, or a third chance, or a 20th chance, if they're willing to work for it. If you're not willing to work for it, then you're going to get the same results like I did for 10 years, which was nothing. It was just bouncing around and not willing to do anything for myself. And a lot of it was fear, for sure. Fear of success, it was just fear, man. It was like, on the outside, it was like this egotistical guy and blah, 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 blah. But inside, I was just full of fear. Through all my failures, through everybody telling me like, oh, you're a piece of shit, you're just a drug addict, it just starts weighing on you on the inside. So then you start, you know what I mean? I can't even hold a job. And if I do get a job, I'm going to lose it if I get loaded. And just, it starts like beating you down. And now it's like, I'm being risen up by everything. And I don't know, man, it's cool. And I'm just super grateful. Yeah.
No, and then there is hope, and I think some people get discouraged, like, because of they're like, look at the statistics of like treatment doesn't work, but it's exactly what you said. It does work if you put the work in.
Yep. And what's crazy is that girl that I was telling you guys about that's still sober, and she is like over probably almost closer to 3.5 years. But so it was her first time in treatment. And so I ended up like relapsing in the beginning of our relationship, and I went to treatment and then came back, and I've been sober since then. But what I told her to do was, you do AA, all the stuff I wasn't even doing then, I was telling her to do, and she did it, and she's still sober. And it was her first time getting sober. I didn't do it, and I relapsed, but then I started doing everything with her, and then I was able to stay sober. So it's like, if you're willing to give up and just do what you're told in the beginning, I probably could have got the first time. I just wasn't willing, because I would stand in my own way. Oh, that's not going to work for me. Oh, every excuse I could ever come up with. Oh, I have felonies, I can't get a job. Oh, I have, you know what I mean? It's just, any excuse I could come up with, I would come up with it. I'm so fucked. I'm 37 and I've never worked a day in my life. So now what am I going to, you know what I mean? It was just complete excuses, but there's always a way to work yourself out of it and work yourself into a better situation. But you have to get into action. So.
Very true. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys for inviting me. That was good.